let's return to our top story following the capture by the U.S. in Caracas on Saturday of the Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro and his wife Celia Flores, and the appearance of Mr. Maduro in court in New York today. He's been charged with narco-terrorism and drug trafficking, charges he denies. Meanwhile, in Venezuela itself, the interim leader, Delcy Rodriguez, has held her first cabinet meeting. In a statement, she invited Donald Trump to collaborate, a far more conciliatory message than we'd heard from her earlier on. And the UN Security Council is holding an emergency meeting on Venezuela. Addressing the session, the Chinese representative said no country could act as the world's police, nor could any state presume to be the international judge. Let's speak now to Arise special correspondent James Blue, who joins me on the line from New York City. Good to see you, James. So two very significant moments for Venezuelans to watch today: the swearing in of Delcy Rodriguez as interim leader, and also the appearance in court of Nicolas Maduro in New York. One imagines that Venezuelans will be gripped by the latter, perhaps more than the former. I mean, the sheer image of seeing the iron-fisted president shackled and appearing before a court like a common criminal is an extraordinary moment to witness, and must be fascinating for Venezuelans as well as Americans to watch.
Yeah, Charles, good afternoon or good evening and Happy New Year. I think it is an extraordinary moment. And what you see here is the culmination of many weeks of the U.S. Military and the U.S. Justice Department really working to try to figure out how to capture and how to prosecute and how to bring President Maduro to justice. Very, very different scenes. And in fact, because it is in federal court, it is something that we haven't been able to see directly. But we do know that he has made an initial appearance in court, and we do know that in Caracas, the interim president has taken the oath of office and is now sort of running the country. And, you know, this is a stunning achievement by President Trump, by the Justice Department, actually going into another country, bringing a man out and his wife in from the most secure facility within the country, and then bringing him to the United States to face justice here. This is being termed a law enforcement activity that was assisted by the U.S. military. And I think it's very important to understand that this is sort of very, very sort of unprecedented. The most recent sort of similar activity was in 1988 when the U.S. went in and actually got Manuel Noriega and brought him to justice from Panama to Miami. And so the rationale that was used for that arrest is the same rationale that's being used for this arrest.
Very interesting. We understand that, though, that a lot of questions are being asked in America, especially by the Democrats, about the process and legitimacy of what President Trump has done in Venezuela, and about whether it conforms with international criminal law, and for that matter, criminal law in the United States.
Well, I think it certainly can, and the Trump administration is going to argue, it complies with U.S. criminal law. I do think that it seems very clear that it does not necessarily comply with international law. The U.S. is a signatory to the UN Charter. It is supposed to follow the rules set down by the UN. And in that sort of context, it does seem to counter sort of the rules. The Venezuelans did not invite the U.S. to go in. But if you look at this picture that's on the screen now, you see that he's being escorted by DEA agents, and he's being escorted by Justice Department officials. And I think it's very important. You don't really see military around him. And so this really is a U.S. justice, U.S. law enforcement activity. But getting back to the legality, so there was a guy in the Bush in the Bush Justice Department who wrote a memo, Bill Barr. He went on to be one of President Trump's attorney generals, and he basically lays the groundwork for why the United States can, at times, move beyond the UN Charter and take things up beyond the UN Charter. And that is sort of the justification that happened in 1988, and it's the same justification that they're using now. And so I think that is what you're going to hear. I think some of the commentators have said that it's unlikely that the challenge to his actually being here will actually be germane, and it's not likely to get him out of prosecution. And so I do think it will be discussed, but I don't think, as many people have said, it will sort of play a factor in whether the trial actually takes place.
And James, Cuba, which is a key Maduro ally, has confirmed that 32 of its citizens were killed during Washington's operation in Venezuela. I mean, what more do we know about how that might have happened?
Well, it happened because Cuba is the primary sort of security force for the Venezuelan government, and especially the Venezuelan cabinet. And so Cuba provides security services to Venezuela, and Venezuela is able to export oil to Cuba, and it sort of becomes gasoline there. And so Cuba and Venezuela have a very, very tight relationship. And since Cuba has a much more expansive security service than Venezuela, they were relying on Cuba to provide those intelligence services. And so there were a number of Cubans stationed within Venezuela. And on the evening of the raid, Saturday night into Sunday morning, those were the people who were at the front lines. And of the 80 casualties, as you say, 32 were actually Cuban.
Now, the US has, of course, only extracted President Maduro and his wife. The rest of the Venezuelan government is intact, but the President Trump is insisting that America is going to be in charge of Venezuela. Do you have any sense of how that is going to be put into effect? Is the Venezuelan government going to be guided by the White House, or is the White House going to be running the country directly?
Well, I think the White House has made it very clear they're not going to be running the country directly. And, you know, if you look at the most recent statement by the now interim president, it's a very generous statement speaking about the desire to work in cooperation with the United States. Initially, the statements were much more supportive of President Maduro. We think, I'm told by people in the White House, that was being done just as a way to sort of quell the domestic upset over President Maduro being taken out. So there now seems to be a very direct line between the interim president and Secretary of State Marco Rubio. He is a native Spanish speaker. His family are immigrants from Cuba. And so the hope is that that relationship will allow Venezuela to do the things that the Americans want, and that's largely to reinvigorate with American control the oil industry in Venezuela. You know, the oil industry was sort of taken over by the state, and many of the U.S. Concerns in Venezuela actually left. Chevron is the only U.S. oil company that's still there. There's also the world's largest oil reserve has been found in Venezuela. And so this is actually a big prize. The other sort of large oil reserve is next door in Guyana. And some think that if Venezuela is able to stabilize, it will then make it even more possible to develop the oil outside and on the shores of Guyana, thus creating probably the world's most valuable oil deposits, and that would give the U.S. sort of control of that moving forward. As President Trump in the press conference on Saturday and in subsequent interviews has not once mentioned democracy, has not once mentioned elections, and the sense is they are going to support this regime, the rump Maduro regime, to the extent that they can actually get and extract what they want from this government, which is largely the reinvigoration of the Venezuelan oil industry.
James, thank you very much indeed. James Blue is a RISE special correspondent. He was talking to me on the line there from New York City.